Thank you. It's my pleasure here to introduce our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Vernon L. Jones, Jr. He's the Colonel Commander for the 35th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion, originally from Savannah, Georgia. He enlisted in the Army in 1993 as a legal specialist, MLS 71 Delta, where he then was commissioned as a second lieutenant from Savannah State University ROTC program, entering the Quartermaster Corps in May of 1999. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science with a minor in Military Science and a Master's of Science degree in Management, concentration in Logistics from Florida Institute of Technology. He's held numerous positions of responsibility and command, from platoon leader on up to where he currently is as a battalion commander. He's been stationed in places like Fort Campbell, Kentucky, been in Kosovo, Fort Lee, Virginia, Afghanistan, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Kuwait, and the Republic of Korea. So please join me in welcoming. It's up here.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. Excerpt from If by Rudyard Kipling. Good afternoon to everyone. I want to first thank Mr. Darrell Flaggs for the invite and Colonel Burrell for the approval to allow me to stand here today before you as we celebrate and talk about Dr. Martin Luther King today. About 20 or so years ago, I committed the poem If to memory. For me, the poem described attributes that are necessary to become successful in life. The ability to remain calm under stress, moving on after suffering a great loss, and very importantly, not putting yourself above or below anyone else. So at this time, in this particular time, I was going through a bunch of stress at the time. At that time, it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. Felt like it was real hard to come up for air, and I kept searching for something, for somebody to throw me a lifesaver, just so I have a moment just to breathe, to get everything off my back, just so I could sit back and relax for just a moment. As I look back over that time now, I realized that it was just a fleeting moment in the grand scheme of things. You know, once it became past, once it went back, it became just a small hurdle that I had to pass in order to open the doors to new opportunities, or doors to new possibilities. And as I reflect on the memory and the legacy of Dr. King, I can't help but to wonder how many times Dr. King must have found himself surrounded by those who were losing their minds to the stress and the pressure that came with the movement. Yet he knew that he had to remain strong and calm and press on. How many times he found himself having to shore up and to pray up from self-doubt, wondering himself if he was truly doing the right thing, if he was truly going along the right path. I wondered what it was like for him to face all the lies and the hatred that was set against him as he traveled on freedom's journey, yet not give way to that hate while remaining humble and still being able to connect with the people. Today we gather to remember and reflect and celebrate the accomplishments of one of history's most prominent men. And as we do this today, I want you to leave here with four things. One, an idea of what life was like during Dr. King's time. Two, a little history of Dr. King's accomplishments. Three, an assessment of where his dream is today. And four, a charge to you for service. So if you will, take a mental walk with me as we journey back about 60 years in time to a geographical area in the U.S. known as the South. You walk into a restaurant with a few of your friends, and you take a seat at the lunch counter. You ask for a cup of coffee from the waitress. So when she walks over to you, she gives you a look that can only be considered disdain, and she says, "I will only serve you if you get up and stand." So as you take a look around the restaurant, you realize that there's no one else standing. And you realize there's plenty of open seats. And then it dawns on you, the reason she's telling you to get up and stand is because of the color of your skin. So instead of walking away, you and your friends decide that you're still going to sit there and wait to get served. Even though you never lift a finger in anger or a finger in defense, you and your friends are assaulted verbally and physically for simply occupying a seat. When the police arrive, you think you will finally get some relief, that you will finally get justice, and the people that assaulted you will be arrested, until you realize that the police are there to arrest you. A year later, you find yourself among others who are fed up with being treated like second-class citizens, and you decide to go on a desegregated bus tour. Now, you want to demonstrate that segregation still prevails throughout the South, despite a federal ban on segregated travel on interstate buses. So when you reach South Carolina, police pull the bus over and they stop, and eventually they arrest 2 of the black members that are on the bus. Outside of Anniston, Alabama, someone hurls a bomb through one of the bus windows and sets the vehicle on fire. Now, when you rush out of the burning vehicle, there are men standing outside of the bus. You think they're there to help you, that they're going to pull you to safety, but yet they begin to beat on you and others as they come off the bus as you're trying to escape the smoke and the fire. In Birmingham, Alabama, another mob has attacked another bus with blackjacks and lengths of pipe. In Montgomery, club swinging mob of over 100 men have attacked another bus. And a group of youths have grabbed an individual off the bus, poured a flammable liquid on him, and lit him on fire. Now, the local police arrive about 10 minutes later. State police arrive about an hour later. But by now you've learned through experience that when the police arrive and they're involved, they're not always there to safeguard you. So this knowledge is reinforced when the Montgomery Police Commissioner says, "We have no intention of standing police guard for a bunch of troublemakers coming into our city." Troublemakers, they were called. Men and women who simply rode a bus to prove a point, that though a law was put into place to allow freedom of movement, there were still those who chose to ignore it. Those who chose to ignore or enforce segregation onto others who wished to enjoy the legal right they had to desegregation. Again, they never lifted a finger in defense or in anger. They deserved and they sought justice and respect, yet received only verbal, mental, and physical abuse, simply because they wanted and demanded the same basic rights and privileges that should be afforded to every man and every woman. So I have not personally experienced some of the things that my grandparents have gone through, or some of the things even my parents might have gone through in their youth. You know, the blatant racial disparity that they experienced in a very direct way. I mean, can you imagine the constant verbal and physical harassment that they went through day after day, just wanting a chance for a better life for themselves and for their family? Can you imagine receiving threats against your life, receiving multiple beatings, being jailed over 30 times, and even having your home, your sanctuary, your place of refuge burned to the ground because you merely wanted justice and equality for all people? Dr. King didn't have to imagine this. He and others like him, they lived through this. This was their reality. This was how they were being treated. This was the norm. This was ordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the environment in which the man we honor today had to live and contend with throughout his life. So Dr. King made many notable accomplishments during his short lifetime. His most significant legacy was the improvement of civil rights in the United States, and we talked about many of his accomplishments here today. You know, he was a champion for the civil rights movement, the movement to end racial segregation and racial inequality in the United States. In 1964, at the age of 35, Dr. King became the youngest man ever at that time to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, this honor was bestowed upon him because of his continued emphasis on promoting nonviolent methods in the struggle for equality, bestowed due to his continued determination to never give up on his dream. Dr. King dreamt of a vibrant, multiracial nation united in justice, peace, reconciliation, mutual acceptance, and respect. On this day of remembrance, we are not merely called to honor his legacy, but to celebrate the values of equality, tolerance, and interracial sister and brotherhood that he expressed in his great dream for America. Now, Dr. King led many events which stemmed from holding fast to the tenets of his dream, such as the Montgomery bus boycott that was sparked by the arrest of Rosa Sparks for not giving up her seat. Now, the boycott lasted 381 days and finally led to the integration of the bus system. People, that's 13 months. That's over a year of dedicated and synchronized focus toward a common goal, an abnormal practice that changed the culture of the thought on how society viewed the bus system. Now that's just the bus system. But can you imagine what we could accomplish today as a community if we synchronized and remained as focused and committed toward a common goal as they were back then? The possibilities are endless. Dr. King led the March on Washington in 1963 for Jobs and Freedom, where he delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. He also led the marches from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, not one, not two, but 3 times, as a march for the right to vote. So the challenges we face today are not the same challenges that Dr. King and those he inspired faced back then. You know, most of us here have never and will never experience that level of hatred, never experienced that level of fear that they felt day in and day out. So it's easy for us to misbelieve that Dr. King's dream is finally realized and complete. You know, the military is a melting pot for diversity and has often led the way in changing and influencing societal norms. As we look around this room today, we see men and women of different racial and ethnic backgrounds who have come together in unity. We see minorities in the military who are entrusted to lead America's children into combat, some of whom have all gone on to become 4-star generals. In America, we see an expansion of minorities with PhDs and MBAs. We see minorities in charge of multi-million and billion-dollar businesses and corporations. We see an increasing number of minorities who have become millionaires. We have experienced a minority, Barack Obama, who was voted on by the people as the 44th president of the United States for the content of his character rather than the color of his skin. And so it's easy for us to believe that Dr. King's dream is complete. We want so much to believe that Dr. King's dream is complete. But Dr. King said, we can never be satisfied as long as there are victims of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. There were numerous accounts of police brutality in the past few years. Do a quick internet search of police shootings of unarmed victims resulting in deaths, and no matter where you look, you will see a disparity in the number of deaths among black men versus any other race. Dr. King said we can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity. In December last year, New Jersey opened a state civil rights investigation into the case of a black high school wrestler who was directed by a Caucasian referee to cut his long, twisted locks, or his hair, or forfeit a wrestling match. Now, this young man was forced to make a difficult decision, and for some of us, it might not make that much difference. But if you understand that for some individuals, the way your hair is your identity. So this young man was forced to make a decision about his identity in the span of a few short minutes. And he's continually reminded of this moment as it was replayed over and over again in social media. So Dr. King said that we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Dr. King gave his last major speech, his last major sermon, on March 31st, 1968, at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. In his speech, which was entitled Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution, Dr. King brings forth a subject that he believes was so close to racism that he wanted to mention it as another challenge. And that challenge is poverty. He goes on to describe his experiences observing men, women, and children in poverty, not just abroad, but right there in America, the richest nation in the world. Now, the Declaration of Independence states that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the words of Dr. King, but if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life, nor liberty, nor the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. A survey was conducted here in Japan of having local officials patrol communities to spot those without permanent dwellings. Now, though the numbers are probably a little low, should be much higher, about 4,997 men and women were recorded as being homeless. In the U.S., according to the 2017 Census Bureau, there were 39.7 million people living in poverty. And another census estimates that about 550,000 were homeless men, women, and children on any given night. Now, these numbers are just for 2 countries, but what of the world? Again, Dr. King said, if a man doesn't have a job or income, he has neither life nor liberty, nor the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. So I submit to you that just because we here are of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, and we can identify ourselves as equals among each other, that our children can play together, learn together, and work together without fear, that we have security in knowing that we have jobs, we have incomes, and we have the ability and the resources to pursue some amount of happiness. It does not mean that Dr. King's dream is completely realized. How can it be realized when there's still so much racism, prejudice, injustice, and poverty in the world today? Today, let us not only reflect on the bravery and the sacrifices made by those who dare to dream of a world where justice, freedom, and equality is realized for all people, but let us also reflect on how each of us individually can come together collectively to make a change, however small, in the world. As I come to a close, I want to leave you with this. Remember the dream for equality, and know that even in this day and age, there are those who are desperately seeking for just a small measure of the life, liberty, and happiness that you have found. Celebrate life and the freedoms we all now enjoy, and act by giving of your service to others. So Dr. King once said that not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great. Let us all be great by committing ourselves to service. May God bless each of you. Thank you.